as a leader, you need to show up like an elite athlete. You're showing up as the best version of yourself every day.
Hey, it's Brad here. And before we get into the show, I want to tell you about the show sponsor. Now, I personally use this company in my own business. And so I was thrilled whenever they reached out and said they wanted to sponsor the show. Today's sponsor is JobTread. JobTread is an all-in-one construction management software. JobTread streamlines processes for builders and contractors from estimating and scheduling to job costing and invoicing. With JobTread, you can create precise estimates quickly, improving the chance of winning jobs, and their dynamic scheduling allows you to keep projects on track with Gantt charts and scheduling tools. JobTread also allows you to collaborate with teams, vendors, and clients in one location. No more missed information, who said, she said. It's all in one location. And their API integration tools connect with your favorite software like QuickBooks Online, Hammer CRM, or any other API-friendly apps. JobTread is perfect for builders and contractors of all sizes. Whether you're a solo contractor or run a large team, JobTread scales to fit your needs and works great for remodelers, home builders, deck builders, pool builders, and general contractors. Try JobTread today and learn how it can help streamline, manage, and grow your construction business. Visit jobtread.com or click the link in the show notes for more details. Now let's get to the show. Hey, welcome back to the show. Today I have another special guest with me, Dr. Gretchen Gagel. Gretchen, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Well, I know we got a lot of things to talk about, specifically women in construction. But before we get into all that, just give us kind of a background of who you are, how you got into construction, and just kind of bring us up to where we're at now.
Yeah, it's interesting because writing the book obviously involved a lot of reflection. I was told by my father I couldn't go to engineering school because girls didn't do that. And when I turned down Harvard to go to engineering school, he actually disowned me when I was 17. And
Wow.
it's funny because you can say, well, that's kind of a drag that happened, but it really inspired in me that anybody can be anything. And somebody telling somebody they can or can't do something because they're a woman, they're Black, they're whatever. Out of engineering school, I was hired by Ralston Purine as their first female operations manager. So there were 62 men and me in the country. I thought, well, somebody's got to do this first. And I rose quickly through that organization. I was running a plant with 800 employees by the time I was 27. I left to settle down in Denver, did my MBA in finance. And that's when I joined FMI. A lot of people will know FMI in your audience. They've been around for a long time doing strategy and M&A investment banking work. In fact, I had lunch with Hugh Rice, their former chairman, yesterday. And I started their owner services group. I really wanted to consult on the client side, General Motors, Intel, Marriott, to help them understand how to more effectively partner and buy their construction services. Kind of this low initial cost doesn't equal low initial price doesn't equal low total delivered cost.
Yep.
I was at FMI for 11 years and left the industry for a bit, came back in as president of Continuum Advisory Group, doing that same advisement. And then I got really crazy and moved to Australia in 2018. So I now divide my time between Australia and America and starting to shift my focus a bit on how do I help more women be successful in the industry now that I've kind of my induction into the National Academy of Construction in 21 kind of said, I don't think I have anything left to prove to anybody anymore.
That's impressive. That's definitely an impressive career you've had. And you have a new book coming out soon. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Building Women Leaders, a blueprint for women thriving in construction. It's available for pre-order on Amazon. Hopefully it's coming out April 1st. And I was approached by Wiley to write the book. I had actually decided with my coach, Edgar Schein, I wasn't going to write for a while. And Wiley knocked on my door about 3 months later and said, would you write a book about women leaders in construction? And it's really been a labor of love. 120,000 words. You've written a book. You know how hard words are to come out. It has 130 people in it, Olympians. I interviewed 50 industry leaders. but it's really a bit of a reference book about what great leadership looks like and explores the context of being a woman leader in construction.
Interesting. I know we were talking before we got on here about you had interviewed, I think you said over 50 leaders
Mhm.
in the construction space. What was kind of your biggest takeaway from those doing those interviews and preparing for the book? What was your biggest takeaway?
One of them was really the importance of allyship, and that's a word we're starting to use more. I didn't realize when I joined FMI in 1994, Lou Bainbridge was my boss, and I actually interviewed him for the book. I said, Lou, I want to make sure I get this right because I'm putting it in my book. We had contractors that said, "Oh, you're not sending Gretchen out to do my strategic planning. I need a John or a David or and Lou's response at the time was, "Well, you're going to need to go find another consulting firm because Gretchen's a part of our team." And I appreciated that at the time, but I don't think I really, really deeply appreciated it.
Yeah.
Having come from manufacturing, Ralston Purina, Coca-Cola, where yes, I was the first female operations manager, and yes, did I go through some really challenging situations. And the women and men that I interviewed, Tom Riley, senior vice president with Turner, the role that allyship plays woman to woman, man to woman, and it's about respect and behavior. And yeah, I think that was one of the biggest takeaways, how important that is in our industry.
The allyship is what you were calling it. Basically, it's someone's got your back,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, if we boil it down to the most basic level, is that you know that your teammate, your boss, your coworker, whoever's got your back no matter what.
Yeah. And I think, I start out, the first chapter talks about unconscious bias and dominant culture. And it's really the only chapter that's just kind of focused on directly on the female experience. When I was writing about unconscious bias this year, I was flying. I'm on the Associated General Contractors National Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and I was flying to the committee meeting in Washington D.C. And I got in a shared ride car, and the driver, youngish man, maybe 30, said, "Oh, are you having a busy week?" And I said, "Yeah, Kansas City, Chicago, DC, New York, pretty typical week." And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, are you a flight attendant?" I was in a suit, okay. And I said, "No, I'm a business executive." And I said, "Do you think you would have asked a man that?" And he said, "I probably wouldn't have, or I would have asked him if he was a pilot, right?" But until you've walked in someone else's shoes, you really don't understand that different people are having different experiences in the world. Sam Clark, CEO of Clark Construction in Lansing, who chairs that committee, has said that often to me. And so that ability to understand that different people face different challenges that you may not be present to. And being a woman in the construction industry, you definitely face unique challenges.
Well, yeah, I mean, we could. I'm sure you'd agree that the construction world is traditionally a man's world. I mean, that's just who where we're at. So,
Yeah.
it's just like fighter pilots. Women being fighter pilots was something that's been new recently in the last decade or so. Before that, it was never even a consideration, right? And so, someone at some point took that stand, some female at some point took that stand and then broke those barriers. And so there's definitely a lot of that. And it's, depending on where you go in the country, some are more progressive than others, some are more traditional. You see it, different ways. But one thing that's interesting, I don't know if you're on TikTok or not. Do you happen to get on
No,
TikTok at all?
no,
Okay.
haven't
Probably a good
haven't
thing.
crossed that frontier yet.
It's probably a good thing. But I have a lot of followers on there, and I have a lot of engagement. But there's a lot of female contractors, specifically like in the trades, working on the field, that have accounts, and I always stop and watch them because it's just interesting to me. And I even actually had a guest one time. She's a female carpenter. Her and her husband own a construction company, and so that's just you just don't see it very much. And so
Mm.
I like this topic to talk about it. And yeah, I mean, it just there's so many different angles you can go with this. So you said that the allyship was one thing that kind of stood out.
Mhm.
What's the biggest challenge that you think that men in construction have with women in construction?
Yeah, that's a great question because if we are going to, and back to dominant culture, you said it. The reason we have a dominant culture of a certain type is because of the population. And it's not the fault of the men in the industry.
Right.
It just is, right? Um, and most of us as women, when I joined FMI in 94, I did everything I could to fit in. I wore blue blazers and khakis and loafers. I dressed just like the guys. I smoked cigars when I played golf. I mean, it was just, you just want to be in the tribe,
Right.
right? The dominant culture. And so I think that men being present to what women experience, the number one microaggression against women in any work setting is being spoken over. And I watched it happen in a trailer last year where a female assistant project manager was giving an update and she'd get two sentences out and the male project manager would just start talking right over her. And finally I said, "Can we go back to her point that she was trying to make?" And I asked one of the other board members if he had picked up on this. And he said, "Yeah, oh, absolutely." And I said, "Well, did you think to say anything?" And so when we walk by behavior, we condone it. And I'll give you a happy story about this. We have a project with a female project manager, and one of the framers on the project whistled at her one day. And she went in the trailer and she's like, "Oh, maybe they were just whistling a song, kind of try and write it off." And our superintendent went out and called every one of them down and said, "That's our boss. That's our boss. And you'll treat her with respect." And he called the owner, and the owner backed him up on it. So I think fundamentally it comes down to how do we create the kind of industry? We have 750,000 to a million person shortage right now in the US. We have to be attracting talent. And young men, I'm finding, are less tolerant of certain behaviors also, and they're leaving the industry. So how do we create this really respectful, not so stressful, not so hard that only the toughest people can survive it? I think that's a little bit of how I feel about the industry, and what men can do is just think about how do we make this a great industry for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's, things change over time, whether you like it or don't like it. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but depending on, your position and stuff. But I've said this before on a podcast, my best employee that I ever had was a female. And if I could clone her and, bring about 10 more of her on, I would absolutely do that. And so, you know, obviously like I was saying earlier, there's different parts of the country and stuff where it's like, you know you're never going to catch a female dead in my business or on my job side. And that's unfortunate that they have that perspective, but there's an opportunity right now if you're listening to this and you're just not even thinking about hiring a female because it's just always been men. Like, I would encourage you to actually look into doing that for sure.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of research out there. So when I moved to Australia, I just finished my PhD in leadership. Why I thought it was a good idea at the age of 50 to fly 120 flights a year as president of a company and do a PhD at the same time for 4 years, I'm not sure. I learned a lot about leadership, org culture, and change. Those are the three things I studied in my PhD, and I started teaching at the Australian National University in their MBA program, and I teach at the University of Denver in their MBA program. And I met a gentleman named Robert Marshall, and he has an organization, K Teams, and he's studied like 800 technical teams. And
Wow.
one of the number one differentiators of the high performing versus low performing is whether they have women on them. And there's lots of research out there about high performing teams. In fact, I'm coaching a CEO right now of a pipeline company in Australia, and he's just purchased the company. He used to be head of sales and marketing. And all of a sudden one day I'm like, we're never you don't have any women on your senior leadership team. And he called me back the next day, and he listened to this. I have a podcast with Bob talking about his research, and he goes, "Help me find a woman." Here's the position I have open with your network in the pipeline industry. Can you help me find the right person for this management position? So I think it's a business decision. Your teams, once again, this is research. The diverse on all kinds of diversity, age diversity, socioeconomic background brings diverse thinking, and you're better at problem solving as a team. And that's what we do in construction, is solve problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's, and men are good at some types of tasks. Women are better at some types of tasks than men are, and so like having a good balance on your leadership team can actually be the difference of having your high performance team, like you were talking about.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you, this woman that you wanted to clone over and over, what was it about her that made, then that's one of the things I ask people. What women do you admire in the industry? Here's a sad note. A gentleman with 30 years with a major chemical company couldn't come up with one name of a woman he admired in the construction industry. That made me sad. But when they talked about women, it's like, well, what did make them successful? Why was she so successful?
Well, I mean, this was for she was a painter. So, I mean,
Hmm.
this was not necessarily a leadership position in a big company, but in my
Everybody's a
remodeling
leader.
company. What's that?
Leaders, everybody's a leader in my
Oh yeah,
mind.
yeah, but I mean, not like a
Influences.
senior vice president of a multinational company kind of thing. But
Right.
she, I mean, you got to take out like the irresponsible people, right? Like we don't talk about those, but she was a mother, right? And so having, she's good at that kind of instincts of that part of it. But what I loved about her was that I didn't have to check up on her. Like she was an A player. So like she did painting and she also did a lot of the estimating. And so I would say, hey, here's a job we're going to go look at. She would go out there, tell me we need this, it's going to take this.
Mm,
And then I'd sell the job and she would go do it. And a lot of times I wouldn't even talk to her for 2 or 3 days,
mm.
like literally with no communication. And I knew the job was being done.
Yep.
So there was no babysitting, no checking in, make sure, checking in, but really kind of micromanaging. There was none of that had to be done. She was just a rock star. If she said, I'll be there Tuesday at 7 o'clock, she was there Tuesday at 7 o'clock
Mm.
and did not have to worry about her one bit.
Yeah. And we have men employees like that too. I think
Sure.
the interesting part, I was consulting to a large mining company in Australia and talking to one of their general managers, and they have an open cut pit mine and an underground mine. And in the open cut mine, he had gotten to 30% women operating equipment and everything. And he said it's dropped our maintenance costs by about 40%.
That's interesting.
And he said because when the light goes on, they call maintenance and they're changing the culture. And then the guys go, "Oh yeah, well, I'm going to get in trouble. She's calling maintenance when her lights comes on. I got to call maintenance when mine does." And it just kind of changes the culture. And it's not like women are some superhero
Right.
whatever. But I think the other key point about the book is I've been advising all kinds of leaders. And my point about everybody's a leader, because I see people with titles that nobody's following, and I see people with no title that everybody's following.
Yeah.
And leadership is about influence, leadership is about change. And to be able to go back 50 years in leadership theory. So I have Olympians in the book and all kinds of different people outside of construction as well, about how do you build strong relationships with people? How do you empower teams? How do you build a culture in your organization where people are doing the right thing just because they're supposed to do the right thing? And that was really one of the most fun things about the book is, I've been CEO, managing director of 4 companies. I've advised CEOs, and now I've gone and wallowed around in all this theory about leadership and research and stuff. So kind of to bring that all together with hopefully what is inspiring for people as far as how to be a great leader.
Yeah, I can't wait to take a look at that whenever it's, you said April, the 1st of April.
April 1st,
When it's,
I'm fingers crossed. I'm speaking at the Associated General Contractors National Conference on April 9th. So I'd like to have some copies of the book with me. And I'm speaking at FutureCon, the big construction conference in Australia on I think it's May 20th and 21st. So I go back and forth between the 2 countries regularly. But yes, hopefully it's out on April 1st.
Good. Yeah, definitely have to pick that up. So let me ask you another question from a woman's perspective. What would you recommend if if there's a woman listening to this who's in construction or whatever? What would be your recommendation for navigating the construction world as a woman, specifically in a leadership position? Because that's where you're probably going to have guys that are like, I don't take orders from a woman kind of
Mhm.
mentality. Like, what would be your advice on dealing with that? Hey, just a quick time out from the show. If you're a frustrated contractor who's dealing with low profit margins, stuck working on the tools every day, or doing free estimates for people who are never going to hire you in the first place, I invite you to my private contractor community. the Profit Club, where contractors just like you are adding 2 to 3 times more profit each year without producing any more jobs and finally getting completely off the tools to never do another free estimate again. So if you're ready to increase your profits, stop doing free estimates and get off the tools, then all you have to do is click the link in the show notes to learn more about the Profit Club and see how it can easily 2 to 3 times the cash in your pocket, give you a proven sales process that will convert more jobs with ease and get you off the tools once and for all. And the best part is you can do all of this without having to produce more jobs than you currently are. Click the link to learn more. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, we all have to love the industry. I love the construction industry. We are responsible for building and maintaining the assets of civilization. Without us, nothing in the world happens, right?
Yeah.
We don't charge our cell phones. So, loving
Yep.
the industry is why I've stayed. You have to surround yourself with the raving fans that give you the confidence to overcome those people that are going to doubt you, and it still happens to me. I mean, I'm 60 years old and I still experience unconscious bias or have to kind of prove myself in a way that I know what I'm talking about, right? And
Yep.
in the way maybe that a man doesn't. And so I've been running a women's leadership program in the pipeline industry in Australia, now the crane industry. 90% of the women report an increase in confidence. And so it's just having that confidence, and it's just knowing that being your authentic self, like you don't have to be like the guys, like what I did 25 years ago and the blue blazers and all that. Everybody leads in a different way. And when you think of a great leader, Brad, when you think of someone you've interacted with and you think, gosh, that person's a great leader, you know what they stand for, you know what their values are. And that's what you respect about them as a leader. And so understanding what your leadership brand is and being authentic to yourself and your values, and then being confident that you know your stuff. And also the book actually ends with a segment on asking for help is not a weakness. I've asked for help
Yeah.
a ton of times. When I went back for my PhD at 50, I went and found as many people as I could who'd done a PhD and said, how do I do this? Right. So it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help, but to be confident in what you do know and be authentic to your values.
Yeah, I love that. Be authentic and not to try and fit into a specific stereotype of what you're supposed to be like. This might be somewhat controversial, but I'm in a lot of like Facebook groups, and some of them are like women in construction Facebook groups. And inevitably, I'll see a post of a woman is like, "Hey, I do this. I'm an electrician," but then there's almost always a post of them dressing a certain way, and I'm like, did you have to put that picture in there? You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like there's just a little bit of that. I think it does a disservice to some women in the construction industry.
Absolutely. Your brand. I just recorded a podcast with Harrison Monarth. He is a New York Times bestselling author on personal brand and executive presence. And when I start with it, I also run mixed gender first time leader programs. I love working with first time leaders. Nothing in engineering school prepared me to lead a plant with 800 employees, right? And about an hour into it, I'll say, what words would you use to describe my brand? And they'll yell out, confident, fun. I like to have fun, knowledgeable, approachable. I'm seen as really approachable. Everything you do reinforces your personal brand. And the way you dress, do you have typos in your emails? I never put anything in an email that I don't want to be the headline of the Denver Post. It all reflects back upon you, male,
Yep.
female. I've had conversations with male construction executives saying, "Hey, what about a blue jacket every once in a while? Are you dressing to the part and representing not just your personal brand but your organization?" I had a conversation with a CEO once. I said, "What's your voicemail message on your cell phone?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "You should go find out." I was coaching a month later. He goes, "It was horrible. And our company one was horrible. And I changed all of them." And it's all those little things that add up to brand is a person's lived experience with you, right? And so male or female, thinking about how you dress, how you speak, how you write. everything is a reflection on your brand. And I would just say, be thoughtful about what you want that brand to be, and then align everything you do, not in a disingenuous way, but once again, authentic to your values.
Right.
That's what I would have to say about that. And it is unfortunate, but
I've talked a lot about, anytime I would get an application for someone that was applying for a job, the very first thing I do is go look at your Facebook profile. And if there's a picture of you acting silly, doing, flicking off the camera, acting the fool, I'm not going to interview you,
yep.
because that is your personal brand at the most basic level. And you can't even get that part right.
Yeah, no, you're going to find lots of pictures of me playing golf with kangaroos around me. So, and avoiding all the poisonous snakes that are in Australia on the golf courses.
Yeah. I
But
know there's a lot of them there.
you're absolutely right. And when I left the construction industry for a bit, when my kids were 7 and 8, I'd been flying every week for 11 years. I just had to get off a plane. I ran a women's foundation. I ran a nonprofit for 5 years. And we had 2,600 people at our luncheon. I was testifying for legislation all the time. I hanging out with the governor and the mayor. And I learned really quickly, in Denver, Colorado, there's only 2 degrees of separation between anybody. So don't make anybody mad, or you're going to piss off the entire city.
Yep.
And that's when I started this. If I don't want it to be the headline in the Denver Post, it doesn't come out of my mouth. It's not in an email. If I wouldn't be proud, you think about if I wasn't proud, if my mother saw this or whatever, I'm continually shocked and amazed by what people put up on social media. And we all want to have fun. I mean, I have pictures of me out doing fun things
Yeah.
on my Facebook. But yeah, I think people should really stop and think about, once again, men and women. What's the brand I'm trying to portray out there? How do I want people to see me? And yeah, I think it's important.
Yes, similar to your saying about being in the Denver Post, I always had a saying I heard a long time ago, and I latched onto it. It's like, don't put anything out in the world if you don't want it to show up one day. Basically, pretend like you're running for political office.
Yeah.
Pretend like you're running for the president. You don't think everyone's going to be digging into your past and looking for anything.
Mm.
And the thing is, like, when you're 22 years old, you're not thinking about running for political office, right?
No.
But when you're 45, you might decide you want to run for mayor or governor or whatever. And all of a sudden, here's all the ammunition.
Well, I'm just glad social media wasn't around when I was in engineering
Yes,
school. Let's just put it that
that's true. And
way.
I honestly, I don't know how young kids do it today with all the, all the social media, but that is true. When I was in high school, that wasn't around either. So that was a blessing for us.
Yep.
But still, doesn't mean that you have to on purpose go out there and act a fool and then post it all over for the world to see, because once it's online, it's there.
It's
Like,
there.
you can't take it back.
Yeah. No. No. And I think, once again, great leaders, people understand what they value. People respect. I just want to keep going back to this word respect, because that's when we think about women, or I had a non-binary person on my podcast. They work for a construction company. They were brave enough to be on a panel at the Australian Pipelines and Gas Association conference with me this year. They got such a great response and support from the construction company they work for, support for their clients, and a feeling of being treated with respect. And isn't that what all of us want in the world, is to be
Yep.
valued and respected and be able to show up at our job, do a good job, go have fun with our families, and feel like we weren't judged. And I think the chapter I wrote about organization culture, how you create a value alignment throughout your entire organization. I'm working with a global mining company on this right now, 10 different countries to get different cultures, different contexts, where we're trying to create this overriding feeling of respect and belonging. And when you have high engagement scores with your employees, you have high productivity, you have profitability. It's a business decision. It really is a business decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, culture in your business is everything. From the top to the bottom. So yeah, I mean, I think I wanted to go back to something you said with respect. We definitely want to give respect where it's due, and I think you would agree with this. It definitely starts with your self-respect,
Oh,
right? And so that's where a lot of those pictures that show up on the internet that probably shouldn't show up is because we don't respect ourselves enough to realize, what's going on. And so for some, if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I just don't ever, no one ever shows me respect. No, I don't get the respect I deserve. Might need to look at how you present yourself, how you carry yourself.
Mm.
If you respect yourself, that might be a good place to start. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. You have to back yourself. You have to respect yourself. And another good friend, Gabrielle Dolan, she's written quite a few books. She's Australian on storytelling. And she just did a LinkedIn post about, we play golf together, she and her husband and I a lot. And she said, why am I taking out a bad ball when there's water in front of me on the golf course? I'm not backing myself. I'm literally saying I'm going to hit the ball into the water because I'm taking out a water ball, which I've done all the time, right?
Yep.
And backing yourself, respecting yourself, caring for yourself, self-care. I had a health scare 15 years ago. I just ran 2 miles right before we got on this podcast. I run almost every day. I've started doing
Awesome.
vinyasa yoga, but it is respecting ourselves, taking care of ourselves. And I say, as a leader, you need to show up like an elite athlete. You're showing up as the best version of yourself every day. And it is about respecting and caring for yourself and backing yourself and believing in yourself and having confidence. I think a lot of that behavior that you're describing, that self-destructive behavior, at times can come from insecurity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a psychologist. That's one I've joked that might be my fifth degree, but I think some of it can come from insecurity. So that just taking that time to be, and it takes time to reflect. I still have a coach. I'm 60 years old. I coach people, and I still have a coach. I've had emotional intelligence coach for 10 years. That time to reflect about, who am I? What do I stand for? What do I want to be putting out into the universe? What's the difference I want to be making in the world? Having those deep reflective conversations with yourself, which can be very hard. You can be the hardest person to hang out with is yourself sometimes. But really grounding yourself, I think, is important for all of that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I talk a lot on here about the journey to self mastery.
Mm.
It is a journey. It's not, you never really arrive in that capacity. But I was actually I was a guest on a podcast right before this, and we were talking about investing in yourself. And, one of the things that I noticed, and I'm sure you would agree with this, but what's interesting is the higher you go up in like success, if you're measuring by success, and whether it's financial or whatever it is, but those people typically are more invested in themselves than you might think. Like from the outside looking in, you're like, oh, this person's successful, they don't need a coach, they don't need this and that. And it's like, no, it's the complete opposite. They got to that level of success because they invested in themselves the whole way through.
And we keep learning the growth mindset. Carol Dweck, she
Oh,
wrote
yep.
a great deal about the growth mindset. And if I ever stop getting curious, my coach 𝐒𝐓𝐇𝐄 passed away. He was 94. He wrote 40 books on culture and leadership. He was
Wow.
at MIT. I found him during my PhD. He was amazing. He was my coach for a year, and he passed away in his sleep. So I hired a new coach. She has a recent master's in psychology and neuroscience from King's College in London after I'm going to say 20-year career in finance. And I'm just picking her brain so much about what we've learned in neuroscience. She said, we've learned more in the last 5 years about our brains than we have in all of history before that. And so the day that I stopped being curious, and you're right, the higher up people get, the more they invest. I invest more in my health. I invest more in my mind. I invest more in how I continue to develop as a person, and once again, getting better every day. That there's and sometimes I forget what I learned 10 years ago, and then I
Yep.
have to go back and relearn it again, right? I got to be a great listener, how to have empathy or whatever that is. And that was what was really fun, and why there's 130 other people in my book was bringing all those ideas. Anna Mears, the most decorated summer individual Olympic athlete in Australia. She's a short track
Okay.
cyclist. She broke her neck and competed 7 months later in the Olympics, and what she went through mentally, and bringing all that knowledge to bear. I would have loved to put 1,000 people in my book. I had to stop at some point, right? But yeah, investing in ourselves, continuing to learn, continuing to be just curious about the world. and that I don't have all the answers, and I want to keep learning.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good segue there for closing the podcast down here. But it's funny you mentioned mindset, because he asked me what's a book that I recommend, and it was Mindset by Carol S. Dweck. I mean,
Yeah,
that I actually give that book to all my clients when they sign up for coaching, because it's so powerful.
it is. It is, and that's really the gift. And there's so many bright people in the world with great thinking. Having gone mechanical engineering, finance, very, quantitative, and then that's what I loved about my PhD, is rolling around kind of in what's going on in our brains and what is this psychology stuff and org culture and leadership and all these squishy things that are not like gravity and the natural sciences. And I really appreciate that people like Carol, people like Edgar Schein, take the time to write these books and codify in language we can understand. So when we say growth mindset, we understand what we're talking about. There's a lot of brilliant people in the world. And yeah, I hope that my book is something that people can keep on the shelf. And I need a mentor. There's a piece on that in this book. Or I don't feel like I have great trust with my team right now. There's a piece on that in this book. And Carol Dweck's in the book. And it's an amalgamation of a lot of people's great ideas on leadership.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it when it comes out. Do you have like, I know it's not coming out till April, but do you have like a website, or because this is going to be posted before the book comes out? Just want
Yeah,
people to be able to find it.
absolutely. It's already on Amazon. Building
Oh,
Women
cool.
Leaders. It's on there for pre-order. GretchenGagel.com is how you find me and find out about what I'm doing on boards and committees and coaching and running women's leadership. And I had a great friend who's another Wiley author say, the book is not the end, it's the start. And I'm sure you
Yep.
feel this way about your book. Speaking to organizations, speaking to teams, speaking to groups of men, groups of women, groups of men and women. How do we continue to have this conversation? Because I think it's through these conversations that we all understand how we help women thrive in construction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So we'll have your website on there. That way, I'm sure once the book's launched, you'll probably maybe have a link on there to it. But you said it's already on Amazon. They can pre-order it now.
Yep.
And the name of that is Building Women Leaders, a Blueprint for Women Thriving in Construction. I always ask this to all my guests, and obviously you can't say your book, Gretchen, but what's a book that you would recommend, or if you're reading one right now, or one that you would recommend, what would that be?
I have two favorites that I reread regularly. Seven Habits of Highly Effective
Mm-hmm.
People, which I think has been out for, I don't know, 50 years or something, but how you
Yep.
build your personal mission, how you identify your values, and then Search Inside Yourself is another great book that involves a lot of people, Daniel Pink and things on how to really develop as a leader. Those are two of my standbys that I read and reread and reread, and yeah, they mean a lot to me.
Awesome. Yeah, the Search Inside Yourself. I have not heard that one, so that's a new one. That's one of the reasons why I asked this question, so I can get some new recommendations. So,
Don't ask me
well,
what the author's name is because I can't pronounce it. He's a Google engineer, but Search Inside Yourself you should be able to find.
I'm terrible with remembering authors on books, but Gretchen, thanks so much for coming on the show, sharing your knowledge, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brad. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you again. Well, guys, that's the end of the episode. You know where you can find me on the social media platforms. You can just search for the Hammer and Grind podcast. You can also pick up my book as well. And there's links in the show notes for my stuff as well as Gretchen's. And remember, until next time, profit is not a dirty word.